I watched a lot of content on South Korea recently. I find it a super fascinating country, and this one is called South Korea is a dystopia. So let's find out what it means and what it is.
Chaebol is the Korean word for the powerful family-owned conglomerate.
From anguish to frustration.
I'm sure they're going to be talking about the Samsung and these big families that own a lot of Korea, and it's a very, very fascinating thing. It's not good, but it's like 5 or 6 companies that own a lot of Korean real estate and property, etc.
The arrogance of the rich and powerful.
An emergency dispatcher in South Korea receives a distress call from a child aboard a ferry.
우리를 도와주세요. 배가 가라앉고 있어요.
The Seoul ferry is making a routine journey to the vacation hotspot Jeju Island, carrying 476 passengers. Most are school children and their teachers on a class trip. The dispatcher asks the boy to put the captain on the phone. If the ferry is sinking, why hasn't an adult called for help? Not all passengers understand the danger. As the boat starts to tilt, some kids yell with excitement, as if they're on a theme park ride.
This is very interesting because I used to take a ferry across. So we used to live in Norway, and there was a lot of fjords there, and we used to take a ferry. And that ferry, and I'm shitting you not, if there was big winds, it would literally be like, if you can see the. Let's get something here that I can utilize. So this, right? So it would be like this, and it would go literally like this. So your plates and stuff would fall off the counter or the table. And the kids would be sprinting up and down, but we were not allowed to be out on the deck when things like that happen, because you could, and you most likely would fall over. So this is a very legitimate reaction. So this makes the story really real.
But soon, the disaster is undeniable.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Yeah, exactly. But not that bad. When in Norway, of course, this seems like it's probably sinking. You know?
Panic breaks out. Shortly after, the 6,800-ton vessel sinks. The boy who made the distress call and 300 other passengers, mostly other kids, drown. The tragedy traumatizes the nation. How could this happen? Who is responsible? Initially, the crew is blamed for incompetence and cowardice.
Very interesting. The fact that the crew is directly blamed is very, very interesting, because a lot of the times things like this would be hardware failure. But I'm not saying that it was. I don't know. We'll probably get to see. But a lot of times there is a hardware failure somewhere. It's not just like the captain just hit some sort of whale or something. And even that would be a squishy thing. It wouldn't be like an iceberg up in the northern hemisphere, where you're much more likely to hit something like that and break, like the Titanic.
When the boat was clearly sinking, the captain told the doomed passengers to stay put in their cabins.
Oh.
He and several crew members fled the scene and left the kids to drown. The South Korean president says their actions are akin to murder, and the captain is sentenced to life in prison. The Korean Coast Guard is also blamed for their sluggish response and for severely fumbling the rescue mission.
So he knew it was going down, didn't call in for distress, and then told the kids to stay inside because it was better. And then all the 600 kids drowned and the crew survived. That is wild. That's insane, honestly.
But then an investigation reveals that incompetence isn't the whole story. The ferry was more than twice as heavy as it was supposed to be. It had been...
See? Hardware errors. If things are designed like this, it's designed to have water in. Okay, this is a bad example because it's also like a heat-proof one. But let's say it wasn't a heat-proof one. But now I put in water that is hot, that is not within the design. What's going to happen? It's most likely going to crack, break, or be too hot to hold. So now it's a user error, and it's not necessarily my fault because I didn't know, right? But in this case, it is my fault because I put hot water in, and it said on the packet, for example, when I bought it, to not to be used with heat. That's kind of what I feel like here. They've most likely been forced to have too much on, even though they knew that this was bad.
Illegally modified to hold more cargo.
Yeah.
More cargo, of course,
Money.
means more cash. The nation is outraged that someone so clearly prioritized profit over safety. Whoever owns the ferry needs to face the music. But
they
who
won't.
is it? In South Korea, corporate responsibility can be hard to pin down. Family-run conglomerates control sprawling networks of subsidiaries.
That's what I thought.
Complex structures often hide who's really in charge. Some families control so much wealth they're deemed nearly untouchable. Time and again, they dodge responsibilities for crimes, yet continue to amass wealth and influence.
Because it doesn't matter at one point. However much money you make, and the more money you make, is all that matters. That's the problem. A lot of these families, they only care about the power. And human life is and has a price, depending on what value you have to a particular planet. Let's say you have a PhD and you're able to make something that nobody else is going to make and it's going to make you money. You're valuable. But if you are a child or something of nobody of repute, you aren't valuable. You have no value.
In this video, we will look at 3 of these families, including the one responsible for the ferry tragedy. South Korea's elite families are so powerful and influential that many say they are the ones actually running the country.
Highly likely. Most likely the same in America too. Except for with Trump, I guess.
The South Korean economy is an exceptional success story. After the Korean War in the 1950s, it was one of the poorest countries in the world. Today, it is the 14th biggest economy in the world. South Korea's rapid ascent is attributed primarily to its export-led economy and to the dominance of chaebol. Chaebol are large business conglomerates that are owned and run by family dynasties. Just after the war, the country's military dictators jump-started these family businesses with capital to rebuild South Korea's key industries. The chaebol thrived and diversified into sectors like tech, finance, and manufacturing. In just a few decades, they helped transform South Korea into a global industrial powerhouse. It's often called the miracle on the Han River.
This is very interesting because I have a few friends living in Korea and we do have some conversation about these particular families. I watched another video recently showing how, I think it was Samsung, LG, and Hyundai buy up apartments and rent it out to their workers so that they will get the profit of those apartments. And it is insane because you want to rent it from somebody, but you can't rent it because you have to put down a deposit. But if you put down a high deposit, you have less rent. So it's almost like you, in a sense, own the house for a little while. But I don't know, there was some other rules and I don't remember exactly how it was because my friends were talking about it. But if you're interested in that, I will have a deeper dive and actually have somebody from South Korea on here to talk about it. That'll be fun.
South Korea's top companies, Samsung, SK, LG, and Hyundai, are all family-run chaebol. And chaebol revenues account for the majority of the country's wealth. Samsung alone is responsible for a significant part of the country's GDP. For 2024, Bloomberg Economics estimates a record-high contribution from the company. According to their calculations, Samsung will likely be responsible for about half of the country's economic growth.
Basically, what are you going to do then? What are you going to do if Samsung is half your economic growth? What are you going to do? There's no way to get away from it because they have so much power. They are the ones, well, one of the few that make the growth of the economics happen. And we are using Samsung TVs. We're using Samsung dryers, washers, all sorts of electronics. We have microwaves from Samsung.
When we work on stories like this one, we've found it really helps to visualize the data. Brilliant is an amazing tool we've used to better...
I'm going to jump over the ad.
Calculating up wealth leads to a lot of concentrated power. Chaebol families enjoy a very cozy relationship with the federal government.
Of course
they receive subsidies, tax incentives, and special favors. And political leaders rely on chaebol for support and advice. For decades, chaebol were widely celebrated as the pivotal drivers of South Korea's economic miracle.
And now they're going to be seen as a greedy bastard to let kids die. And both are true. Both are true. It's not like you can say that one thing isn't true, but the other is. Because they have propped up the economy. Maybe with some governmental help in the beginning, yes, but they have propped up the economy. And now they are focusing on the economical incentives, like not overpiling the boat, for example. And you can't exactly blame them for it either, because they have been the ones to grow the economy. And what methods do you think they've done? Maybe in other countries, maybe in Korea, but that is the mentality they have already.
But the 1997 Asian financial crisis challenged the standing of the families. 13 of the top 30 chaebol went technically bankrupt, revealing the risks of an economy relying so heavily on just a few companies. Nowadays, more and more South Koreans express concerns about the dominance of these conglomerates. Not only that, as the decades passed, the public watched chaebol repeatedly caught up in scandals and crimes, embezzlement, bribery, labor law violations, health crimes.
But are they really shocked at this? You see, Amazon is having loads of problems now, labor ideologies and laws. People have been like working themselves to death, not being able to get like time off when they were sick and shit like that. It's going to be happening in every country or place where there is pretty much no other places to work. I'm saying pretty much no other places, but there'll be loads of other places. But I mean, like, if they employ, I don't know, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90,000 people, there's a lot of jobs there in Samsung. And if everybody quits, they are going to starve. But Samsung is going to also go bankrupt. So you do have a power in numbers, but it's very difficult to mobilize that many people. Actually, let's find out how many people are working in Samsung. Let's see. 260,000 people. Samsung Electronics has assembly plants, sales networks in 76 countries and employs more than 260,000 people. In 2024, Samsung Electronics lost its first position as the global smartphone shipments and semiconductor sales. I'm sure it is like fucking Apple or something. When you're looking at these people and you have 260,000 employees, how hard is it to mobilize any sort of strike or anything? It's going to be borderline impossible unless you have somebody that's incredibly good at mobilizing. And unless they are punished financially, they're not going to care, because it needs to be a hit to their economy.
Crises. For too long, the government has gone easy on these dynasties.
Or finances.
And the people are increasingly fed up.
Of course. Revolutions. That's what happens. That's why the French Revolution happened. People are fed up.
In December 2014, Korean Air Vice President and heiress Heather Cho had an infamous meltdown. It was over a couple of macadamia nuts.
Of
a
course.
Flight attendant had the gall to serve her nuts in a bag instead of on a plate. Cho shouted abuse. She then called over the cabin crew chief and made him kneel to ask for forgiveness. Under her orders, the passenger plane returned to the gate, where the cabin crew chief was fired on the spot. If you're not Korean and you hear about this story, it might just seem funny or absurd. But in South Korea, it was fuel to the flame of growing public frustration. Yet another reminder of chaebol leaders' arrogance and entitlement.
The second you have one of these chaebol leaders that work for the people, he'll be loved, he'll be put up on murals, he'll become like the new fucking great leader and everybody will want him. And then the other chaebol leaders will have him killed most likely, or try.
It took their rage to social media and later the streets. At first, Korean Air tried to downplay the incident. They released a statement saying that because Cho's executive role was to oversee cabin service, it was only natural that she would discipline an offending staff member. But people weren't having it.
I agree.
The public already had issues with the Korean Air dynasty and their shameless antics. A few years prior, Cho's brother was investigated for pushing an elderly woman. Her father has been convicted of tax fraud. And Cho herself was criticized for strategically giving birth to her twin sons in the US, which exempted them from South Korea's compulsory military service.
Interestingly, every male in South Korea has to have compulsory military service. So this is very interesting to see them fly abroad, give birth in a different country, and then most likely get like a second citizenship of some sort. So they have American, South Korean citizenship. I'm not saying that's what they did, but that's logically where I see it going. South Korean and US citizenship. That also means that they can easily do business in the US and in South Korea. Very, very fascinating, because I'm sure that you guys in the US have a lot of Samsung stuff over there too.
Eventually, Cho tearfully apologized and resigned from her post.
I'm gonna pop
She
my
was then
thing
convicted
down
of
here.
violating
Again.
aviation safety and abusing her power. She faced up to 15 years in prison, but was given the minimum sentence of 12 months. She only served 5 of those before a judge reduced her sentence. The chaebol's influence runs deep, all throughout the government, even to the very top. Already in the 2012 South Korean presidential election, a key debate was on how to limit the power of these families. Park Geun
It's very. It needs to be some sort of incentive for smaller businesses, and they large companies should not be allowed to buy any land. Something like that. Because apparently, I have a friend of mine that owns a pie shop in Korea, and to get a new place is A, very difficult apparently, and B, they have to kind of give them like a pay to take over the place. So it's kind of to take over everything that's in there, but it's kind of like not a bribe, but like a gift to take over the place that they're renting, because they had to give a gift. I'm saying gifting quotation marks to the people that they had before. It's very, very, very interesting. And really, if you're seeing this, I wish you the absolute best in getting your pie shop up and going, the larger version of that. And when I come to Korea, I will definitely come try your pies.
Ye became South Korea's first female president.
2013년 2월 25일 대통령 박근혜.
When she took office, many worried it would be business as usual. Her father was Park Chung-hee, the military leader who took power in a 1961 coup. He is considered the chief architect of the chaebol system, and Geun-ye became her father's stand-in first lady when she was 22 after a North Korean assassin had killed her mother. Park Chung-hee's admirers credit him for the miracle on the Han River. His critics remember the cruelty of his iron-fisted rule and his imprisonment of dissidents. One of these was Miss Park's key rival in the election. His name is Moon Jae-in, a former human rights lawyer and...
Very interesting. The guy, what's it called? When you put political opponents in jail, that's not many steps away from a very, very bad situation. And the fact that you cannot say something up against these people because you'll be jailed for it is scary, to say the least. But there is... It's the same problems really happening in the UK too now. People can't really be saying their own opinions online anymore because they'll be jailed for hate speech laws. And it happened in Germany recently as well with somebody that had been sexually assaulted. A friend of her had called that person a pig, and then she got 2 days in jail, but none of the assaulters got any jail time. So there's a lot of weird shit happening in the world right now.
Anti-authoritarian activist during the dictator's reign. Now, in 2012, the ex-dictator's daughter campaigned on a more business-friendly platform than her liberal opponent Moon. She was focusing on reform rather than punishment. Her stance was that chaebol might be unruly, but with the right reforms, they could play fair. But then Sivol happened. This incident was much bigger than
I want you to pay attention to this girl. This girl is most likely, and it seems like she's crying, no? This girl here. This girl seems like she's in the military, in the police, but they're crying. You see, all these girls are almost crying. They don't want to be on this side, but this is their job, right? So that's the other part of this problem. You have a lot of people that aren't believing in the system they're protecting. They knew that 600 kids have been killed. They knew who the problem was. They knew who had these problems and created them, and they have to protect these people against their the normal people. It's very frustrating. If I was in there, I would have been so angry. 600 kids got killed for no reason but greed.
This incident was much bigger than run-of-the-mill embezzlement or tax evasion. Faced with a furious and traumatized public, Park vows to bring the accountable people to justice.
She's not going to. I don't believe it for a second.
After analyzing complex financial records, the Yu family is eventually found to own the ferry. The Yus are well known for their eccentric patriarch, a reclusive businessman / cult-like pastor / aspiring artist named Yu Byung-on. The president says he and his family are the root cause of this calamity and issues a warrant for their arrest. Yu Byung-on keeps a low profile and is rarely seen in public. He's known as the millionaire with no face. And now, He's nowhere to be found.
Of course he is. She probably warned him, like, oh, here, we're gonna put up a warrant for your arrest, leave the country first.
Kicks off the largest manhunt in South Korean history to find Yu. She mobilizes the military and nearly 10,000 police officers to raid the headquarters of the Evangelical Baptist Church of Korea, a religious sect that Yu co-founded in 1962. Yu is a charismatic and inspiring speaker. He was able to attract a substantial following and elicit substantial favors. By the 1970s, Yu's growing church became a money-making enterprise.
I wonder if that's ever happened before, having a church that made money. Oh no, we can't talk shit about cults. But when they become big enough, they suddenly just become a religion. It's kind of weird that people shit on cults, but this started off as a cult and then just became a religion. It's just cults are small religions, basically.
Persuaded members to donate to or invest in companies linked with the church. Those companies sold a wide range of products, from organic milk to auto parts to anima kits. These companies made Yu and his church very rich. At that time, South Korea was still poor and money for investment was scarce. The government granted capital to only a select number of families.
That's what I thought. I assumed because of the militant leader that he would be very selective of who he gave money to, and they would either be to some degree loyal to him or would give him favors in return. And it makes sense. It makes just logical sense, honestly.
But Yu's approach of raising funds through evangelizing allowed him to rapidly grow his businesses, even without governmental support. By the 1980s, his business network was considered a mini chaebol. But then, controversy hits.
What did he do?
In 1987,
how many people died?
32 alleged members of Yu's church were found bound, gagged, and dead in the attic of a factory near Seoul.
Jesus Christ.
The authorities ruled the deaths as a murder-suicide pact linked.
They were all bound, and there was a murder-suicide. Come on. It sounds to me like these are workers who didn't believe anymore or didn't want to do it anymore, maybe. But we'll see. We'll see what he has to say.
They couldn't pay. After the victims' financial records were probed, money was found going to Yu. He was investigated for suspicion that he was behind the alleged suicides, but the charges were dismissed due to a lack of evidence.
Of course.
Nevertheless, courts did find evidence that he was using church members' money and properties to enrich his businesses. In 1992, Yu was jailed for fraud. Once released from jail, Yu attempts to restore his image. He gets really into nature photography and starts exhibiting his work under the pseudonym Ahe. He pays top museums worldwide like the Louvre to display his pictures and tries to build a reputation as an art star who is rarely seen in public. All, it appears, as an effort to distract from the negative press.
That's a very smart way of doing it. Like, to make somebody else believe he's doing something of which he's not doing, just for him to be able to keep doing the things, but then get big into an art form so that he can utilize that to make sure that people are only seeing that, while over here he's doing something different. It's very much it's just like a smoke and mirrors. It's a deception tactic. It's like having your army come up on the left in a row to make it look like a much larger army, but then the rest of your army is coming up on the right to encircle. It's just a tactic to eat you.
He also continues to be invested in various businesses. One of his more profitable ventures is this shipping company. At least $3.8 million went directly to the Yu family. It's the same company that owns and runs the Seawall ferry.
Oopsie.
2 months after the ferry sank, Korean police raid Yu's compound. Hundreds of sect members are protesting the raid.
I would love to know what it said on those ones. I know it was like blurred, so I'm sure that we can't see them. But I'd love to know what the real ones said.
Attempt to build a blockade. A large banner reads, "We'll protect Yu Pyongyang even if 100,000 church members are all arrested."
Holy shit.
Helicopters swirl overhead. Some cult members threaten to fight the police. Others vow to die as martyrs. But after combing the massive compound, the cops leave empty-handed. They don't know it yet, but Yu is hiding in a secret closet 300 kilometers away in his holiday home.
That's fascinating. This kind of reminds me of medieval castles, you know, when they have like those escape routes in the castles built in. Because let me actually find a picture. Let's see here. Escape route in castles. So a lot of castles, from what I understood, had like escaping tunnels or secret passages that normal people wouldn't know about in case of an attack, or this is Dumbledore's army, but like that's not really. But like they had a lot of like secret routes. I'm just trying to find a. Here we go. Unlikely castle. Like you could see, like there's loads of like small places that people could get through. The escape tunnels and hidden rooms and stuff is very interesting because a lot of rich people, like even Zuckerberg recently. Let me see, Mark Zuckerberg. He said he had a bunker, like a doomsday bunker in Hawaii, right? And it was like he spent 187 million on 1,600 acres, and then he built himself like a doomsday bunker, 5,000 square foot underground doomsday bunker. So a lot of these rich people have incredibly, I was gonna say, large, and I would also call them interesting plans in case of arrests and stuff, because all of them have done something bad. Like you don't become a billionaire without doing something bad. You really don't. You have to step across some bodies. Like maybe 10, 20, 30, 40, maybe max 100 million. You can probably get there by not being an absolute asshole, but you can't really get there by being nice, you know? To a billion, I mean, to billions.
A few days after the raid, and 18 days after Yu was last spotted, a farmer finds a dead body face up in an orchard. It's in an advanced state of decomposition, almost skeletal. It's at first impossible to tell who it is. The corpse is wearing expensive Italian clothes and is surrounded by bottles of rice wine, a bottle of shark liver oil, and a book written by Yu. After a 3-day autopsy and over a month of investigation, authorities confirmed that it is indeed Yu.
He killed himself? I don't believe it. Either somebody killed him or it isn't him. That's what I believe. But let's see what they have to say. This is a fascinating story. To all you Koreans here, do you remember this? What do you think about this? I would love to know in the comment section.
Cause of death is never determined. More and more damning evidence keeps coming out about the government and the ferry. Auditors discovered that Coast Guard officials apparently turned a blind eye to the ferry's glaring safety problems after getting courted by Yu's shipping company over drinks at lavish dinners.
Exactly.
Some admitted to letting the ferry pass through inspection points, only guessing from a distance whether the ferry was overloaded. A major factor in its excessive weight turned out to be a marble art gallery on board. Yu personally insisted on adding it to display his artwork on the ferry. One man's greed had sunk the seawall ferry. And as more and more South Koreans were starting to believe, the government's negligence had let it happen.
Of course, but when has the government ever had your best interest at heart? You go and see the food pyramid. There's an American food pyramid, right? American New Food Pyramid, right? There's a new food pyramid, and it's like a wild thing here. I think this is it. At the top of the food pyramid, there's bread, and use sparingly, red meat and butter, refined grains, white bread, rice, and pasta. So they're saying that meat and butter, I know this is a bit small for you guys to see, but that's what it says. Meat and butter are as bad as refined grains, right? Sugary drinks and sweet and salt is as bad as meat. Then optional, alcohol in moderation. Alcohol is less bad than meat. Isn't that crazy? Then you have dairy, that's 1 to 2 servings a day. And then you have nuts, seeds, beans, or tofu here. I don't understand how tofu got in here. And then you got fish and poultry and eggs. I mean, that's pretty good. Then you got vegetables and fruits, healthy fats and oils, whole grains. And then you have, what the fuck? Exercise? What the fuck is this? But the fact that we have like grains here as one of the top ones, it's pretty damning evidence. And it's very interesting that fish and healthy omegas and poultry is worse than like grains. And it's very interesting because a lot of these ones have been sponsored by Kellogg's and all these big companies to make you, utilize it more. Because you have this one. I think this one was one of the new ones as well. Like 30% bread, cereal, and pasta. That's the. Oh, sorry, this is the new federal. The other one was the old one. The new federal guideline. Bread, cereals, and pasta is what you should have the most of. And guess what? Do you think cornflakes is going to make some money on this? Probably. Then you have vegetables. Then you have fruits. Then you have meat, fish, milk, and eggs. Then you have sugar and fats, oils, and sweets. The fact that you should have less of this than you should have of this is just insane. Like, there's a reason why we've evolved this far, and that's thanks to meat, sadly. And I know you vegans might want to fucking argue with me, but that doesn't matter. Like, you can't rewrite history.
Some Korean families like Yu's are wealthy enough to convince government employees to turn a blind eye to their misdeeds, like fudging ferry inspections.
Yeah.
But the really powerful ones can command much more than that. And one family holds truly unmatched
Samsung.
power, casting a shadow over all others.
This feels a bit like Cyberpunk, doesn't it? You remember in Cyberpunk, if you had played the game, you could start as like a corpo, like some sort of trash bag dude, and then some sort of nomad. And the corpos are basically owning the whole goddamn place and just using whatever they want, and that's why people hate the corpos. But people are still not doing anything. Well, I guess the Cyberpunks, a lot of the runners are doing something against it. But
In the months after the Seawall tragedy, candlelight vigils turn into weekly protests, calling for truth and accountability for the government's
That's not gonna
involvement
happen.
in the disaster.
unless you guys do
Frustration
something about it.
grows and people start demanding for Park to be impeached.
Jesus.
The government cracks down hard in response.
I want a little piece here. If there's any South Koreans in the chat, please tell me. Did you guys join this? How was it? Are you still fighting for this? Like how does it feel right now in Korea?
Police use water cannons and pepper spray on thousands of protesters.
That's insane.
Authorities illegally collect intelligence on mourning families in order to suppress anti-government protests.
Jesus
but
Christ.
anger and frustration continue to grow. And in 2016, another huge scandal erupts. It reveals that President Park is most certainly not the leader who will rein in chaebol power. In fact, she's especially cozy with South Korea's most powerful chaebol families. Illegally cozy. President Park is found entangled in a web of backroom deals with leaders of Samsung and other corporate executives.
If the dad was the way the dad was, who do you think taught her to be what? Whatever. Like, there was no way anything would happen that wasn't, let's call it backroom deals and terrible situations. She seems to be, and I don't know her as the president, but from just the dad, she seems to have learned a lot, because she sure as hell wanted reform. You know what I mean? Yeah, baby. But yeah, it's difficult. It's very difficult. How do you fix a problem like this? It's a grand problem. It's much bigger than what you could. It's not just something you can fix overnight either. Rich people like this won't want to give up their power. Like, they're gonna fight tooth and nail to keep it.
That substantial bribes in exchange for governmental favors. Samsung made a $36 million donation to her best friend's nonprofit, which Park rewarded by greenlighting a controversial merger. This merger gave the Samsung family even more control over the country's most powerful chaebol. The head of the family is Lee Jae-young, often called the Crown Prince of Samsung. The bribery scandal toppled Park's presidency.
피청구인 대통령 박근혜를 파면한다.
Oh, she got impeached.
She was the first ever president of South Korea to be impeached. She was sentenced to 24 years in prison and fined $17 million. Lee Jae-young was also arrested and sentenced to 2.5 years.
That's nothing. That's not enough. It's not going to make a difference.
Park is succeeded by Moon Jae-in. He promises not to pardon anyone convicted of corruption. But the influence of Samsung...
Is he going to disappear? That's my question. That's my question.
Samsung and Lee Jae-young proved difficult to curb. Moon ends up pardoning him after just 1 year.
See?
The new president admits that those who condemn Lee's crimes are in the right, but that the nation needs him. The economy relies too heavily on Samsung to have its leader in jail.
That's the big problem. If you have a bunch of massive corporations that has so much power, and then the leader gets impeached for doing illegal shit, and then you have to take him out of jail because you need the leader back. It's a never-ending cycle. You need to jail him. You need to let Samsung fizzle down, and you need to let all smaller corporations start building up, because this isn't it.
With so much power, Lee Jae-yong is effectively above the law. And in some ways, this pardon was just business as usual. Lee's father had also been convicted of bribery and fraud in the 90s, but hadn't served a day of his sentence.
Yep.
A 2022 poll recorded 70% of the public approving the decision. Experts say it's because people fear an economic downturn. They believe if Samsung does well, South Korea does well. Lee continues to occupy a top position at Samsung, now as CEO of Samsung Electronics.
Look at that smile. That smile was, you can't touch me. I'm untouchable. My dad was untouchable. You can't do shit to me. Look at that smile.
A top position at
Doesn't
Samsung,
even say anything.
Now
Just smiles like a Hannibal Lecter.
Samsung Electronics. He's also the country's richest person. Already before, President Moon unexpectedly pardoned the former President Park after she served 5 years of her sentence.
Of course.
The reason he gave was to promote the people's unity. The dictator's daughter and the crown prince of Samsung both walk free. And while many everyday South Koreans express frustration with corruption, chaebol still hold considerable appeal. They're by far the most desirable places to work. Top chaebol offer much higher wages than regular companies. Every year, over 200,000 South Koreans scramble to apply for Samsung.
And that is why they'll continue to reign supreme. Because you have to be in unison. But when they pay better than the competition, people will still work there, and they will still be okay with the corruption and everything. And then their children will die in accidents like what just happened.
As long as South Korea's wealthiest families control so much of the country's economy, the question remains if real reform is even possible.
Yeah, that's what I think. Yeah, it's basically, it's not Korea, it's Samsung. Jesus Christ. Well, that was interesting.